Next, we look at another organization working to defend the rights of the people, this time against one particular deadly violation: torture. Believe it or not, despite being a punishable offense, torture remains worryingly prevalent within society. Why? Rights activists feel that there is a culture of impunity in the country, as well as a lack of political will to implement related prohibition laws. In our next story, we feature some initiatives by civil society groups to address the situation.
යම් කිසි කෙනෙක් වදහිංසාවට ලක් වෙනවා නම් ඒ වදහිංසාවට ලක් කරන පුද්ගලයන් අපරාධ වරදක් සිදු කරනු ලබනවා. දැන් මේක හුඟක් වෙලාවට සාමාන්‍ය මිනිස්සු අපේ රටේ දන්නේ නැහැ. ඒකට මිනිස්සුන්ට දොස් කියන්න බෑ. අපි නීතිය කොහෙවත් උගන්වන්නේ නැහනේ. නීතිය උගන්වන්නේ නීති විද්‍යාල ආයතනවල පමණයි. ඉතින් සාමාන්‍ය මිනිස්සුන්ට නීතියේ තියෙන මූලික සිද්ධාන්තයන්වත් ඉගෙන ගැනීමේ හැකියාවක් නැහැ.
Charmaine Gunaratna is part of Jana Sansadaya, a group of lawyers and activists that have long been working on the issue of torture in Sri Lanka. At workshops like this one in Colombo, they attempt to raise awareness amongst various sectors of society about the prevalence of torture and how it could be prevented. Unfortunately, despite their ongoing activism and the laws that exist to safeguard people from torture, it continues to prevail.
So if one is to say that the reason behind torture is to extract information or confessions, then I would say the police have to be equipped, given the skill, knowledge and legal assistance to carry out investigations without engaging in torture.
Established in 1992 to work on human rights issues, Jana Sansadaya soon realized that cases of torture were common amongst the complaints they were looking into. Since 2000, they have actively tried to work towards its prevention by organizing public events and discussion forums to raise awareness about torture. Although there are legal guarantees of the prohibition of torture, activists and lawyers say that these are not effectively implemented. Practical measures to prevent such violations and ensure effective enforcement of domestic legislation prohibiting torture have not been put in place. This workshop looked at ways of minimizing torture in detention centers in particular, as it has often been justified in the past as an inevitable occurrence during to the presence of war and the threat of terrorism.
We can't specifically direct at a situation and say because the society is such or because terrorism was there, we should not concentrate on laws governing torture and so on, because under the Constitution everyone is entitled to the equal protection of the law. So if a person is to say that laws should not be enforced during war or during eradicating terrorism, I can't agree with that, because that is not what is expected of law. Law is in operation during all times in our country, and it should protect the citizens of this country the way it is expected to do.
According to statistics, more than 80% of the cases of torture that have been filed in court are not by criminals, but ordinary people, including women, and people who happen to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. In other words, it is not inflicted as a part of investigations or limited to isolated acts committed by a few. It is widespread and appears to have become entrenched in society. A dangerous development for human rights and security of people everywhere in the country.
I think as a society, we need to be aware that torture takes place. We need to be sensitive towards the problems of the victims. We need to accept that torture is wrong, that torture should be stopped, that we as a society should adopt a zero tolerance towards torture.
The comprehensive rehabilitation of torture survivors is the focus of the organization known as Survivors. they looked at these concerns at a recent workshop in Colombo, held in collaboration with the Delhi-based organization Society for Social Research, Art and Culture. Participants discussed related matters arising from their own experiences.
Positive thinking is very important because it is only the thinking which changes your behavior. As you all know, the behavior is always with the thought. What do you think? See, all of us sometimes are in a very high mood, sometimes in a very low mood. And when we are in a low mood, our thinking is different.
If a client recall the past memories,
yes, right.
So he become violent,
yes.
So he become very angry. So the stress control and the relaxation techniques and the anger management. So it also very neat to...
Yes, it's very, very important.
This is the 5th National Workshop on Rehabilitation of Torture Survivors and their families, organized by Survivors Associated, who conduct psychosocial interventions and capacity-building programs in several parts of the country. This group consists of medical officers attached to government hospitals in several districts of the country who are working with trauma patients and torture victims.
We had some workshops over the past couple of years, for doctors and medical and legal personnel from around the island to give them an awareness on what we do with torture survivors, how they can work with torture survivors to make the lot of the torture survivor much better. And the program actually consisted on letting the doctors know what kind of avenues are open to them for redress to torture survivors. So the doctors and lawyers we trained at those programs continued to work with us.
We get people with lot of injuries. They have been undergoing lot of war traumas, so we have to do a lot of counseling and psychological therapy, as well as we have to give medical therapy for the people who are suffering with anxiety, depression and post-traumatic stress disorders.
We found it very useful, as earlier we had a lot of patients, but we are unable to follow them or refer them to other units. So this program is helpful to identify other peoples who are working with the torture survivors.
Interventions by non-governmental organizations are seen as important to address the impact of torture, whether at a psychosocial or legal level. Their work is a strength to the victims and survivors of torture, and also to the rest of society in the fight to bring an end to this culture of violence.